We're just going to start, Tracey, this afternoon, just sort of talking about your feelings and your worries about staying open and caring for those frontline workers' children during the pandemic.
Hi, Daniel. Well, when lockdown was first announced, I made the very personal decision to stay open. I knew I wanted to because I wanted to play my part and help my families, although I did obviously need to have them discussions with my own family, who luckily were all in agreement with me. I was very open and honest with all the parents about my concerns about staying open, but I did know that we all needed to work together to keep us all safe and well and to protect the children's mental well-being at this time.
I think that's really key, Tracey, and I think, like you say, it's that communication with your parents, isn't it? And having those discussions, so that sounds really positive. How did you sort of make your environment safe for your children and for yourself and your family during this time?
Well, after initially making my decision, I put an action plan into place. It was bullet points really, which expanded as the days went on. I talked with the key worker parents, initially to see if they needed childcare, and secondly, they did, what days, hours they would need to enable them to keep on working. I had to base the environment around how many children I knew I was going to care for. I was really lucky at the time. Due to where parents' working patterns and flexibility, I was able to stagger children's starting times at the setting and to keep the numbers of children interacting with each other to a minimum. I spoke to all parents whose children would be attending, and I shared with them my action plan and tried to offer as much reassurance as I could.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Tracey. It's about being reactive, wasn't it, and being very sort of being able to modify your approach due to a very ever-changing situation. Yeah, how many children did you have to care for at the beginning, Tracey?
Well, I currently have 5 key worker families, which consist of 9 children, but initially only 3 of those families needed childcare. One family had 2 siblings were to attend school and needed 4 mornings a week for the school run, and 2 other families, another consisting of 2 siblings, who needed hours between 9 and 4 p.m. 3 days a week.
So you had a fair few number of children, so that must have been a challenge. When these children have obviously been with you during the start of this pandemic, what were the children's fears and the parents' fears at this time?
Well, in the first few days before lockdown, I had long, lengthy discussions with parents about any concerns that they may have had, or any suggestions that they could offer on the plans I intended to put in place, which I'd already shared with them. The general consensus from a parent's point of view was that they were happy that I seemed to have everything in place as best I possibly could, and that they were happy for the children to be left with me and cared with me. I think the focus for me was on the children's fears. All of the children have been really affected by this pandemic in one way or another, some more than others, unfortunately. But it was always important for me that we talked about what was happening and any fears, worries or concerns they had, and were addressed and discussed. I think a couple of examples, some of the children were attending school where they had to socially distance, but at the setting they didn't. They were also really worried about their parents who were working on the front line, and they were also missing and upset not being able to see their grandparents and other close family members.
I think it's been such a difficult time, and I think you're absolutely right. Children's well-being throughout this has got to have been a real focus, and I think especially for those key worker children, coming to your setting every day is potentially the only normality they've had. So their well-being is definitely the top of the agenda.
I knew that the activities I planned and what we all did together would play a big part in the children's well-being during this time, making sure they had lots of fun, keeping them occupied, and also making sure they had downtime. And a couple of the activities that we did do, we planted flowers, a range of vegetables, we made rainbow pictures for our frontline workers and their parents, we built and bought a greenhouse, we played with loose parts, and we played in the mud kitchen endlessly. The children loved being in setting. I really didn't envisage that. I thought it might be really difficult, but it wasn't. We had so much fun.
And I think that's testament to the relationships you have with your children and your families, and creating that safe place for them to come and and make sure they have fun and enjoy being there. So that's a really fantastic thing to hear, Tracey.
I think as well, I think that's probably one of the biggest things that's come out of this whole lockdown pandemic. I always thought I had quite close relationships with my parents and children, and I did. This whole situation has strengthened them bonds immeasurably. The closest we feel now, sharing all them experiences together, has brought us all a lot closer.
I think that links really nicely into the next part we're going to talk about, Tracey, which is like your successes and your challenges during this pandemic.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest challenges I faced during the pandemic was ensuring all parents were adhering to the lockdown rules, and in turn having to address any concerns I had by discussing it with them. These could possibly potentially make for very uncomfortable conversations, but I knew that I had to have them if we were to keep us all safe and well. Another big challenge was keeping the children all safe and well and my family, based on the plans that I had put in place. These plans could change instantly and did so very often. So I needed to make sure that I kept on top of everything too. I think, oh, sorry, that's it. That's all I'll say. That's a challenges bit anyway, Daniel.
So do you want to talk about your successes during this time as well, Tracey?
Okay. So during this time, some successes have been really strange. One of my biggest successes, our biggest successes, was initially a challenge that I faced, was not being able to take the children out or to the usual groups. We attend forest schools, we go to play groups. This was a really big concern of mine, as it was a completely different way of working for me. However, this, as I say, actually turned out to be one of the setting's successes. As I said, we spent so much time in the garden, planting and growing lots of vegetables and flowers, which we've done before, but not on the scale that we have now. We've got greenhouses in the garden, and we're getting to the point now where we can taste our vegetables. It's been fantastic.
And I think knowing your setting, Tracey, not going out to groups and things would have been a very big change. So it's good to see that you've managed to look at that in a positive light, definitely. What sort of positive feedback have you had from your parents, Tracey?
I think the initial positive feedback from parents was the fact I was going to stay open. I've got a couple of single parents who would really have struggled if I had not. And of course, I've been very flexible. So my flexibility, like one of my parents was transferred to a COVID-19 hub, and she had to work till 6:30 of an evening. So having that flexibility there, knowing that her children were safe, has really helped her. Flexibility as well, where a parent might need me a day or two before. Being able to do that. One of my parents was working on a COVID-19 ward with a shortage of staff, so she wouldn't be able to tell me days in advance when she needed me, but I was always able to offer the care for the children. So I think flexibility, staying open, and obviously the children being happy. We've done lots of fun activities.
And the children's happiness is absolutely I think the biggest positive we can take from this situation, and the fact that they've been safe and enjoying being in the setting. What sort of positive changes have you seen come out of this situation then?
I think one of the biggest positive changes I've seen is how we utilise our setting in the garden. We've utilised it so much more than we ever have before, and trying and planning new activities outside. We've basically taken things back to the basics. And with recently being allowed to go out, the children have been playing hide and seek in the park, climbing trees. We've been going on local walks around our area, looking at our local history, which myself and the children have all loved. I think this is something that I intend to continue in the future. Finding the right balance would be so important moving forward.
And I think that's really great to hear. And I think this situation has been so unusual for everybody, and it's thrown up challenges that we never could have envisaged. But to be able to take positive change from that is, again, testament to you as a setting, which is brilliant.
I think also as well, I think a positive change on a personal level is my confidence in my own ability as a childminder has grown so much over the last 4 months. Being able to think on your feet, thinking outside the box, dealing with fears and worries of the children and their families, in such an incredibly unusual time, whilst trying to do your jobs the best you can, is a big challenge. But I feel like we've done that.
Absolutely, and I think from what you've said, you've done that and you've exceeded that. So a massive well done on that front. Absolutely. So just to end on, Tracey, for people that maybe have only just reopened or aren't open yet and have got a little bit of trepidation about opening, what suggestions or useful advice would you have for those people?
I was genuinely terrified when I decided to stay open through lockdown. But being with the children again and playing and plan activities is amazing. It's so much fun. Just be yourself and do what you've always done with the children, obviously within the official guidance parameters. I noticed working from the beginning of lockdown, over a short time, my fears and worries subsided and my confidence grew weekly, and it continues to grow now.
And I think that's exactly what it's all about, Tracey. And it's doing what we've always done as practitioners and supporting the children and those families. It's just ramped up a little bit due to the guidance and parameters we have to work within at the moment. But I think that's a really good message for people to be able to take away.
I think, can I also just add one more thing, Daniel? I think another big thing for me to advise, any useful advice, but don't be afraid to ask for support, help, or advice. I initially felt really isolated, but I am lucky to have a small, close group of childminder friends who I leaned on for advice and support. I opened up about my experiences, and they were there for me when I needed them. I kind of figured out quite early on that was so important for my own well-being, to be able for me to do my job. Also, don't be afraid to ask your local authority development workers for help, advice and support. They are there to help. I did numerous times, and the advice and support I received was invaluable. And I think the biggest thing, and most importantly, there's no such thing as a silly worry or a stupid question. If you need help, guidance, clarification on anything, please just ask someone.
And I think that's a fantastic point to end on, Tracey. That's exactly what it is. If you need help, if you need support, use your networks, use us as a team, use your professional bodies that you're part of, but get that help and support. And you're not alone in this situation, definitely not. Well, thank you very much for that, Tracey. That was fantastic.